Officer Alex Taboni had just stumbled upon a plot of illegal marijuana plants. The land around them was cleared of brush, and trash littered the bare ground. This is not what most park visitors expect to see when they visit a state park to go fishing or to go spend time in nature. Luckily, Alex and his team are working hard to eliminate sites like these and to keep the parks safe for everybody.
Oh, we go to them all.
You just heard Alex Taboni, who is a State Park Peace Officer Supervisor for California State Parks. The quote you just heard was in response to how he chooses which illegal cannabis grow sites the Special Enforcement Team go to. I'm Jesus R. Valdez, and this is Returning to the River, a podcast from California State Parks focused on watershed stories. This season, we are telling stories from the San Joaquin River watershed. There are various reasons why people visit California State Parks, such as seeking the beauty of nature or to help improve their mental health. Unfortunately, criminal organizations have also been known to use the parks for nefarious reasons, such as illegally growing marijuana, also known as cannabis. This can make visitors to the park feel unsafe or unwelcome. These activities also cause harm to the plants and animals living in the park, damaging the sensitive ecosystem of the San Joaquin Valley. I wanted to learn more about how California State Parks deals with these types of grows, so I talked to Alex, who was assigned to the Special Enforcement Team of the Cannabis Watershed Protection Program. Proposition 64, which was passed in 2016, made recreational adult cannabis use legal throughout the state. A primary effect of this proposition passing relates to your tax dollars. One of the complaints I hear about California is the taxes residents have to pay. Have you ever wondered where those tax dollars go to once you make a purchase? Many of those dollars fund public projects like roads, schools, and libraries. So what happens with the sales tax on legal cannabis purchases within the state? With this proposition, those specific sales tax dollars go, in part, to the CWPP, formed in 2019, which protects parks and public lands from the impacts of illicit cannabis cultivation and restores degraded watersheds back to their natural state. In this episode, we will learn more about the impacts, dangers, and telltale signs of illicit cannabis grows, as well as how SET enforces the eradication of these grow sites that are found through state parks, including the watersheds of the San Joaquin River. But before we learn more about that, let's discover more about who Officer Alex Taboni is. Alex has always loved the outdoors and going to parks, whether they were national, state, or local. One fateful day, he would have an experience in a state park that would change his life forever.
One time I was out on a hike and I ran into a ranger and I was like, "What are you doing out here?" And he was like, "I'm working." And I thought that that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. I could not believe that people got to go hiking for work. So I was like, yes, I'm going to do that when I grow up. And fast forward 15 years and I did.
He liked teaching, and his original plan was to become an interpreter, who is a park employee that strives to connect the visitors to the park by giving them information about the ecosystem in said park, and let the visitors complete the emotional connection. However, after speaking to an interpreted ranger, she recommended that he become a law enforcement ranger. But Alex at first was hesitant about the career change.
I don't want to be a cop. Ugh. And she was like, you know what? It's an exciting adventure. They get to do all sorts of things besides just be cops. You know, they respond to search and rescues. They respond to fires. They respond to medicals. And then within California State Parks, you still get to be a generalist. Like you still get to do programs and campfire programs and stuff like that if that's what you really want to do. And I was like, maybe I'll look into that. And I did. I was like, you know what? That actually sounds pretty cool, pretty exciting. And so I signed up to go to the Ranger Academy. Before I went to the Ranger Academy, I was actually an interpretive seasonal for 2 years for California State Parks. And then I went to the Ranger Academy and been doing that ever since.
Even though Alex's job is stressful, he appreciates what the job has given him.
We have a lot of times we're in a really remote area. It's really hot. It's dusty. It's sweaty and it's exhausting. We've been up since 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is to get out to the site, and we're sweaty. We're tired. Our stuff's broken at the end of the day, but it's very satisfying. You know, the only people that go to some of these remote places in these parks are growers and us who are out there chasing them. You know, these are places that are reserved for wildlife. These are places that are reserved for all of the animals and plants to call that place home. And to get to share a little moment with those plants and those animals that live out in that remote corner of that park, and to share that moment, share that place, and know that I'm out there protecting them, and nobody else ever gets to see those places, nobody else ever gets to experience those places, is really special. And the number of mountain lion kills that I found, like stuffed under the brush while hiking to a site, or the number of hidden waterfalls in a remote canyon. And the only reason why I was up in that canyon was because I was following a grower's polyethylene pipe that they were using to steal the water. It's just beautiful, and it's special to be a part of that.
Places that illegal cannabis is growing are called illicit cannabis grows. The appearance of these sites changes since California geography changes, such as some are flat, like the Central Valley, or a more mountainous region like the North Coast. However, there are distinct traits that each site has. There is usually a water source, water storage, a grow plot, plants, a camp, as well as trails. The San Joaquin River watershed has around a dozen known former cannabis grow sites. Some state parks that were affected by illicit cannabis grows are Great Valley Grasslands, Dos Rios State Park, as well as George Hatfield State Recreation Area. Great Valley Grasslands and Hatfield State Recreation Area are located close to each other in Hillmore and Stevenson, respectively. They are specifically in the middle San Joaquin Lower Chowchilla watershed. Dos Rios is located 8 miles west of Modesto in the middle San Joaquin Lower Merced, Lower San Celeste watershed, which is 23.5 miles northwest of the previous watershed. The reasons why these state parks are targeted by growers are because the grows are easy to access, have plenty of water, and they are hidden from the visitors and staff. Alex gives an example of a grow site that he saw near the San Joaquin River watershed.
The sites that we see in the San Joaquin River watershed, there'll be a willow thicket along the river. They'll have a little keyhole cut through the edge of the willow thicket that'll get them inside, and then the entire center of that willow thicket, all the trees are cut down. So there's like maybe 10 feet of willows. That's part of a couple hundred square foot willow area, and then the entire center of that's all the native vegetation's been cut out, and there's just plants planted in rows in the middle of it.
There are also negative impacts on the wildlife because of these illegal grow sites.
So when growers decide that they are going to grow cannabis on state park property, they're hiking off trail, they're going to a remote location, they're cutting trees to make space for the plants, they're digging up the landscape to cut terraces so that they can plant plants in those steep hillsides, they're digging planting wells, they're diverting streams. So they're taking water that should be flowing naturally downstream where all the wildlife use it, all the plants need it, and they're putting in miles of polyethylene pipe, like irrigation pipe, to get the water to their plants. Cannabis is a very thirsty plant. Like each plant is drinking like 5 gallons a day in the summertime.
Another negative impact is that the growers will use pesticides and other harmful chemicals, which can endanger the natural processes of the river and water resources in the park. These substances can affect the animals that live in the water, as well as people who may use the water.
They also bring like really harsh chemicals, pesticides that have been banned within the state of California because they're so toxic. Things like carbofuran or metamidofos. Those are pesticides that the United States has said, hey, these are way too toxic. Nobody can use them for any reason. And the growers are smuggling it into this country and then putting it on state park property and then dumping it all over the landscape. We also see those same chemicals, those same water diversions on private property that's adjacent to state park lands, which we investigate because, they're diverting the stream before it gets to the state park. So the wildlife that lives at the park are still being affected by that upstream grow, or it's being affected by that downstream leaching of all those harmful chemicals, the fertilizers, the pesticides coming into state park property.
A state park's environmental scientist, Colette Bradley, sees the damage that these chemicals and pesticides cause to the groundwater and, consequently, to the local wildlife.
Because we're essentially overusing water in the Central Valley, there is a lot of subsidence across the valley floor that they've noted. And so with that, when you're pouring something into like a shallow cistern, that is going to have immediate effects on the groundwater system, because then as a result, that water is immediately what's going to be pulled up by people. But I do know that there have been a lot of finds of dead small mammals, dead small amphibians, especially, as well as reptiles within these grow sites. And a lot of that is due to the chemicals that they're using on these sites because they're unregulated, because they're doing illegal grows on public land. So they're not real concerned with making sure that their pesticides are lined up with California's specs and what is legal here. And so most of the time it's unregulated stuff because that stuff is harsher. And so it kills what they want to kill a lot more efficiently. And they don't care what they spray on these plants or what they do to this land because it's not their land. It's just public land that they've commandeered.
Beyond the impacts to water quality, wildlife, and vegetation, there are also often unconsidered human impacts from illegal pesticide use. Many of the actual growers in the plots may have been forced into the work by the transnational drug organizations and are directly exposed to many of these hazardous chemicals. The people who operate these sites can make it a threatening atmosphere for a person who might unknowingly find the site.
You know, these folks are not the nicest people. This isn't like a mom and pop hippie kind of a folks that are growing pot out there. These folks are generally part of transnational criminal drug trafficking organizations. So these guys are defending their grows. They've got real guns. Like we've caught people on the state park property with AR-15s, AK-47s, stuff like that. People with armor-piercing ammunition. A lot of these guys are like cartel members that are out there doing this stuff. It's not just a dude trying to make a little extra cash. You know, it's a criminal organization thing. It's organized crime.
There have been times where state park staff have entered a grow site unknowingly. A senior environmental scientist for state parks, Heather Reef, told us a story about one of her colleagues, Nathaniel Wigington, accidentally stumbling into a potentially dangerous situation.
Nathaniel, he one time walked into a grow at Caswell Memorial State Park, and he and another seasonal at that time, they just kind of dropped. He scurried on out and called me as soon as he could not hear anyone and said, "I am in a grow right now. What do I do?" And so we called 911. We tried to get him as much help as we could right away. And eventually they were able to get the people out of there. But, you know, we've had numerous grows in that park just over and over again. And again, with this Cannabis Watershed Protection Program, which we call CWPP internally, that we're able to open up that site. And now we'll see signs of somebody trying to start, and we can, we have more staff out there. We have more law enforcement out there, or our rangers, our peace officers. And so we're able to stop it right away.
With the seriousness of illicit cannabis grows, the state parks needed a way to respond to these criminal sites. This is why they created the Special Enforcement Team. One of these program areas within CWPP is SET. They are a specialized team that destroy illegal cannabis grows.
We've got the Special Enforcement Team. That's the law enforcement wing of the program. So we're the folks that protect the sites. We do surveillance on the sites. We enter the sites. We apprehend the growers. We eradicate the plants. We write our report. We send it off to the DA's office so that we can prosecute the growers. So that's our role.
There are differences between someone on set and your typical law enforcement officer. For instance, they have the same equipment as law enforcement, such as handcuffs, as well as a truck that has a star on the door and a light bar on top, so they are able to pull over cars. Lastly, just like a highway patrol officer, there are state-sanctioned peace officers who can also give traffic tickets, but SET is focused on state parks rather than highways. SET chooses which illicit sites to prioritize in a few ways, with the highest priority grow sites being the ones that are in state parks. The next level of importance is if they are on public land, such as land that's managed by the U.S. Forest Service or a local public lands agency. The third level is a nexus grow, which is a grow site outside of state parks property that has an impact on state park resources, like grow site access trails or roads that cut through parks. You might be wondering how they choose between two or more grow sites when they are all located in state parks.
That being said, there is criteria. We have a lot of parkland that's in what has been identified as priority watersheds. Those priority watersheds were identified by the California Department of Water Resources Water Quality Control Board, as well as the Department of Fish and Wildlife, for being on a high likelihood of having impacts from illicit cannabis grow operations and have sensitive wildlife that will be impacted by those cannabis grow operations.
He shared an example of an illicit cannabis grow that was in a priority watershed that SET discovered and later eradicated in 2025.
It's called Waddell Creek Annie Nuevo Frontal Watershed. It's on the north coast of San Luis County and the south coast of San Mateo County. And there's several identified species of special concern there. San Francisco garter snake, coho salmon, and Central Coast steelhead. So those are sensitive species. We're trying to protect those. They're sensitive to the impacts in that watershed. So that became a real high priority for us to get out there and hit that grow site. That one was, like I said, was on state park property and in a high priority watershed. So that's chef's kiss of something we care about.
CWPP often works in an interdisciplinary manner, and environmental scientists from the natural resources team often collaborate with cultural resources staff to clean up the sites. They go to the sites with the help of forestry aides and remove all the trash, camping gear, as well as polypipe tubing. SET will then bring a helicopter to remove all the trash from the grow site. The Natural Resources team is also responsible for attempting to restore affected watersheds to their former glory, which helps the animals and plants that call those watersheds home.
Those folks also put together watershed scale restoration projects that look at improving the watershed quality and the wildlife habitat in watersheds that have been impacted by cannabis grow operations. You know, things like those fertilizers, things like those chemicals, things like all the micro trash from like the wrapping of the chip bags that the growers throw off into the woods. We're never going to get rid of all of that stuff. The mobilization of all the sediment from digging in those terraces and all those planting wells. We never get rid of those impacts. We can't. So instead of trying to put the ship back together, we try to make sure that the ship is in steadier seas. We try to think of, okay, well, this watershed has been impacted by this cannabis grow. We're never going to get rid of all of those impacts. What other things can we do to improve the quality for the wildlife that live in this watershed so that at least if we can't remove all those impacts, we can help to mitigate it by thinking of other projects we can do. So we've done things like road removal projects to get rid of roads that are in watersheds that are impacted by cannabis grow operations. We've done dam removal projects to get rid of things like that.
Another team that Alex works with is the Cultural Resources team. Illicit cannabis grow operations have the potential to impact archaeological sites in state parks. Since many of these operations significantly disturb the landscape, CWPP sees it as a priority to fund cultural resource surveys to proactively identify and protect sensitive cultural resources. One more important team that SET works with is the Roads and Trails team, which is the team that manages CWPP projects impacting the roads and trails through the parks. This team sometimes removes roads and trails if they can be taken advantage of, as well as improves certain roads and trails so staff members as well as the public can access.
These are our roads and trails folks. Like I said, they were instrumental in some of the road removal projects we've been working on. We've got some up in Humboldt-Redwood State Park. We've got some here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So they're like getting rid of old logging roads and stuff like that. Those logging roads have a big impact. Normally, the historic ones weren't made in a sustainable way. So they mobilize sediment and throw it down the watershed. So we're getting rid of some of those roads. And then in other places, like at Great Valley Grassland State Park, we're coming up with a plan of building trails out there because one of the big reasons why we see a lot of grows at Great Valley Grasslands is because the public can't really access it. There's no trails. There's a couple, but not really. So we're thinking like, oh, hey, let's put in some trails. Let's put in some bike trails. Let's put in some boardwalks. So that way members of the public can go there. They're going to be able to experience the beauty of their California state parks. And the growers are going to be like, well, there's a trail running through this place. I'm not going to put a grow here. I'll get caught.
Besides eradicating grow sites and discouraging future growers, Alex recognizes that one of the CWPP's big goals is to educate the public about why we should work to protect the natural resources of our state parks. This includes teaching the public about watersheds, the focus of this podcast, and CWPP's Watershed Interpretation Team.
We also reaching out to make sure that we share the importance of watersheds, what a watershed is. A lot of people don't know that everybody is in a watershed. So, if we're going to protect watersheds, we got to make people care about watersheds. And one of the ways we make people care about these things is by, discovering the beauty of them, discovering the importance of them through things like this.
Watersheds can get so confusing that even some rangers don't know what watersheds are.
I teach natural and cultural resource management at our Ranger Academy, and we have a blocks where we just talk about what watersheds are and what impacts the watersheds are and stuff like that. And the vast majority of our Ranger cadets are like, I don't know what a watershed is. It's like a shed where you store water. So we want to talk about like how watersheds work and how, everything you do in a watershed impacts stuff downstream of you.
SET always makes sure to communicate effectively with state park staff throughout the state so the SET team can make the area safe for the public as well as the teams that work at the state parks.
We brief our staff on what to do if they find any suspicious circumstances, to make sure when they're out there, like we have environmental scientists, we have roads and trail people all the time that are out there on the landscape. And we want to make sure that if they see some black pipe running from a creek, we're like, well, that's probably really suspicious. Let us know about that. Then we go and investigate it. Then once we've identified a site, we let our staff know to stay away from the area, and we quickly put together an operation to get out there and hike into the site, clear it, apprehend the growers, and remove the plants, remove the infrastructure and all that. So that way people get back out there and start using their public land again.
You may be thinking, wow, this is a big job, or even they're fighting a losing battle. But all the hard work that Seth and the other teams have done has contributed to positive change. There has been an overall 90% decrease in illegal grow sites in state parks as a result of Seth's proactive mentality. From its first year in 2020, there were 20 grow sites, but in 2025, it decreased to only 2 sites. The lowest number of grow sites was in 2022, with only 1 site.
I chalk that up to a very active program. We actively are searching for sites. We actively are targeting sites. And I think that's having an impact. I think that we're seeing a lot less impacts from that because we're trying so much to target these sites quickly.
That is not the only positive result that has occurred. According to the CWPP Impact Report, in these 5 first years, Seth has removed 84,000 cannabis plants as well as 9,000 pounds of processed cannabis. He also credits the other teams that worked tirelessly to remove the grow sites, which helps state parks ensure that the growers are not reoccupying the land.
Now that we have a dedicated program that has multiple specialists, like people putting together a geospatial information system that tracks all these sites for us, working with environmental scientists to completely and thoroughly clean up every one of these sites, working with our roads and trails team so that we build trails that go through sites so that, members of the public hike through and it's no longer a remote place that a grower would want to grow. And we have an active, dedicated law enforcement team that is constantly checking on these sites. We've seen a lot less instances of reoccupation than we used to see in the past because we have a dedicated program of multidisciplinary folks that are out there working on that.
Heather Reef, a senior environmental scientist for state parks, feels safe conducting her work on former grow sites due to Seth's training and commitment to safety.
They're clearing the areas for our team. They're making sure that they're secure and safe. I really appreciate the way that state parks has handled that, our taxpayers' money, and getting that training and working with the different areas of state parks and not just protecting themselves. So I do appreciate that from coming from when we didn't have that to now. It's so important.
Luckily, there are times when Alex can de-stress in a stressful job. He says that there are 2 types of fun. Type 1 fun is something fun in the moment, such as going to an amusement park. The second type of fun is fun that isn't necessarily enjoyable in the moment, but in retrospect, can be seen as fun.
The place that is the home of Type 2 fun for us, it's a park called Robert Louis Stevenson State Park. It's along Mount St. Helena. The park is split between Napa County, Sonoma County, and Lake County. It's a volcano, so it's got really porous, rocky soil. So the water percolates really high into the mountain and then comes down. The Napa River starts on Mount St. Helena in Robert Louis Stevenson State Park. So we've seen a lot of grows there over the years, and I've got all sorts of crazy Type 2 stories from that park. Ben and I, he's one of the other team leaders on the team. One of the things we have to do is we have to find where the water source is because we want to disconnect the water source and remove all that stuff. So we're hiking in the site. We get to the site. We catch the guys. Then we have to follow this water source. It's middle of summer. It's August. It's probably 112 degrees. We're hiking along. We're in the sun. We're carrying all this equipment. We finally get to the water source and we decide that we're going to get back a different way. And so it's all this manzanita. So we basically crawl out, and it's a huge cliff, a couple hundred feet of very steep hillside. So we basically crawl out into the manzanita until it collapses, and then we fall, and then we crawl out of the manzanita and we fall again. And it was like falling down stairs of manzanita to get down into this canyon and get out of the sun. Finally get into this canyon where there's some pools of water. And I'm standing there with Ben, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get all the way wet. And I just stuck my entire head into this pool of water. And it's a pool of water that's barely bigger than my head, but it was a brilliant break from that hot, hot day.
One of the main ways that Seth finds out about these grow sites is from public tips. When you're out in your state parks, here are some of the things to look out for. Trails that lead off from the main trail, seeing people carrying any kind of gardening equipment or duffel bags on the trails, seeing vehicle drop-offs, seeing any suspicious black plastic polyethylene irrigation tubing, or even seeing or smelling cannabis. If you see any of these things, note where you are, do not investigate further, and report what you notice to Seth when safe to do so.
A lot of the grow sites that we do end up finding come from public tips. We rely on members of the public caring about their public lands, caring about their state park lands, and letting us know. And no report is too small. If you think that something might be up, let us know. We will follow up and see if anything's going on. And I would rather get 1,000 false reports than miss one real one.
Seth understands that the public is valuable for them to discover and eradicate illegal grow sites, and there are things that you can do to help. One thing you can do is to call the tip line at 888-PRK-TIPS or report it to any state park staff who will route the information to Seth. You can also visit the CWPP website to view a flyer that has all the information visually. Proposition 64 made adult recreational use of cannabis legal in California, but the law is also helping to protect and restore public lands across the state through the funding of the CWPP and Seth. With these organizations, there has been a significant decline in illegal cannabis grown inside state parks. Seth has a critical role in the continuation of removing grow sites as well as arresting the people who are involved in these sites, so visitors are able to enjoy and reclaim the state parks that they love safely. We encourage you to take advantage of these wonderful projects that are protecting our shared natural and cultural resources throughout our state park system. Find a park near you and see your tax dollars at work.
This has been Returning to the River, a podcast from California State Parks focused on watershed stories. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it. To learn more about the people, the places, and the stories featured in this episode, please visit us at parks.ca.gov/returning to the river. This podcast is copyrighted by California State Parks. No part of this podcast may be reproduced or distributed without the written permission of California State Parks, its districts, or divisions. We hope to see you again soon, returning to the river.